Hello and welcome to the Trail Network podcast. I'm Leah Yingling, and this week we are joined by Alexis Crellin. Alexis is a trail and ultra runner based out of Salt Lake City, Utah. She has 2 top 20s at UTMB to her name, a podium finish at Speedgoat, and has just been crushing it on the mountain and ultra scene for so many years now. She's a prior FKT holder on the WURL, which is just a crazy route here in Utah. She's a mom of 3 adorable kiddos, and we get to dive into what it's like balancing all of her plates in this episode. We talk about how you build resilience in kids as they encounter their own endeavors in the mountains, while you also are balancing your own athletic endeavors in the mountains. Alexis is the best. She shares so many great insights with us today, and I'm really excited for you to get to know her. Thanks for listening. All right, welcome to the Trail Network podcast. Today I am joined by my lovely friend and neighbor, Alexis Crellin. Alexis, thanks for joining us.
Of course.
Oh, so happy to have you, Lex. I think you and we go back a few years now, and I've been really excited to share your story with our listeners because I think you juggle so much, and I know we've got a lot of female listeners out there who are moms, who work, who have kids doing their own little adventures, and they coach teams just like you do. So I think your life experiences and then also your experience as a competitive ultra runner in this sport will definitely jive with a lot of the other women out there who have a lot going on, and you just always wonder, like, how the heck do they get it all done?
They don't. No one's getting it all done. Just might seem that way from the outside.
It always does. Oh, well, Alexis, just to start off here on the Trail Network, we like to ask our listeners to share a little bit about themselves. If you wanted to share with our listeners a little bit about who is Alexis Crellin and how you got into the sport of ultra running, and then we'll dive into some other fun topics and go from there.
Okay. Well, my name is Alexis Crellin, and I was doing the math the other day. I think I've actually been in Utah for almost 20 years now. Actually, yeah, just 20 years coming up, which is almost half my life. I'm originally from Oregon, a small town called LaGrande, Oregon, northeastern Oregon, and it was a great place to grow up. And I grew up in a large family. We were all soccer players, and we did like the outdoors, but soccer was pretty much all of my childhood, actually. I dabbled in cross-country skiing or cross-country running, but that's because I lived in a small town, so they just needed more runners. And they were like, if you come to the meets, you don't have to come to practice, just come to the meets.
Show up for us.
Yeah, exactly. But I would say really my first passion in life was soccer and family. And I do remember when I was in high school, I joined this like venture scout group, which was like a co-ed scout group. And we actually ended up climbing Mount Hood through that group. And I would say that was like my first introduction to kind of like the mountain world. And that kind of got me also started off into climbing, which was one of the big reasons I really actually wanted to come to Utah. And came out here and went to school. And in my early 20s, actually kind of like, I don't know, I feel like everybody has to go through things in their life, but in my early 20s, I had come back from, this is like Reader's Digest, but I know, I'm like, bleh. But I feel like it's important because I think everybody needs to be reminded that everybody has gone through challenges. I got married really young, and that marriage did not work out. And I was struggling not only with mental and emotional problems, but an eating disorder at the time. I was diagnosed with bipolar 2, actually. And that first marriage just didn't survive it. The person I was with, really, it was partially the diagnosis, but also, I don't know, maybe I'll give you this. On Friday, Brennan, jumping forward, he got me a little necklace for Valentine's Day, and Brennan is my current husband, and it's a son. And he was like, I love this necklace. It reminds me of you. He's like, because you do bring a lot of bright. And he's like, but sometimes you're very hot. You're a lot of energy. He's like, that's what I love about you. And anyways, that is to say, part of it was also a personality thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Oh.
that gave me time to kind of grow. I went into therapy. I ended up working in wilderness therapy for like 4 years after I went to a treatment center. I was an
Mm-hmm.
outpatient at a treatment center for eating disorder. That marriage fell apart, but I was able to get healthy. And honestly, through working in the outdoors, I was able to stay grounded and surround myself with people that I really loved. And that's kind of when I started doing more running because I kept getting exposed to these people. Like I remember one of my co-guides, like told me he had like 100-mile race on one of
Mm-hmm.
our weeks off. And I was like, what are you saying, Jeff? 100
Like,
miles?
why?
Yeah, I was just like baffled, right? Um, so anyways, that kind of was the beginning of catapulting into that world. And then fast forward, I met my current husband and we love to climb. We were climbing a lot. And we had kids. And the thing about kids is they put constraints on your time. And so climbing is not a very like time efficient sport, but running is. And so we kind of ended up like, that's kind of when I ended up getting into trail running or summiting mountains. And after my first daughter, so that would have been almost like 10 years ago is when, and I was still doing just like fun mountaineering stuff, but that's when I first heard about something called the WURL, which
Uh-huh.
is the Wasatch Ultimate Ridge Linkup. And so that's kind of what stepped me into the ultra world, I would say, was that, which is funny because it's not even really a run now, like
No.
I look
Oh,
back.
it's so funny. Like people are always like, "Oh, are you gonna run the world sometime?" I'm like, A, no, I would not survive it. But B, you also like you don't run the world.
Yeah,
You
there's
don't.
about 8 miles that are runnable out of the 32, but yeah. And my friend Stacy Dre, who you know as well, we met and we were like, oh, we can do this. We can do this. We should go do this thing. And it kind of set us out on a path that was really fun. And I would just say since then, that was kind of the beginning. And then I started to really just like anybody who has been through trauma, I think, in their life or struggles with difficulty, mental health specifically for me. I use the outdoors as a coping mechanism, and that's good and bad, right? Because you just can't always go outside and you can't always
Mm-mm.
run. So you've got to try to get other coping skills, and I could definitely work on getting better coping skills than the outdoors.
The
But
outdoors are some of the best coping, though.
they are, they're like medicine. And I've been off medication now for a long time. I don't know that I think that's a good thing or not. Sometimes I'm like, I probably should get back on, but it's a personal journey for me and it's a personal journey for everybody. But yeah, as my children, it's funny. I wish I could look back at my younger self a little bit and tell myself to relax. Cause I think when my kids were really little, as I was always just like feeling like I was missing out on some of the running because I was just getting into it. I just think that's how it is when you have small children. I think
Totally.
I think that's natural. And I think then 10 years later, you look back and you're like, it went by so fast and they're not so little anymore. And, but that really was a constraint that I think was beneficial to both Brendan and I in our lives. Just because you have a timeline, you push faster. Like this is strange. I feel like I've only gotten faster as with, after
With more
kids.
constraints.
Yeah, exactly. And you just like are more comfortable with pain and struggle. Cause I remember thinking like having this thought once, it made no sense too, from like when you have small kids and you're already missing sleep and people are like, why are you getting up and going running or why are you doing this? And part of it is just like, but I get to choose to do this difficult thing,
Yeah.
versus like being awoke in the middle of the night by a crying child or baby or whatever. So
I'm not choosing that.
yeah, you're not. I mean, you did choose to be a parent,
Yeah.
right? And like
Yeah.
for the most part, most of us can't afford like a night nurse or whatever. So you do have to deal with like that. But
Those little.
yeah, no, it was crazy times. We did a lot, and Brennan was in school all the time. Like he has 2 master's degrees, and we had a van, and that made for a lot of flexibility and family and friends. But yeah, so that's how it started, I would say, and that's where I've kind of fallen in and out of. I've had some injuries. I've had an ankle surgery that took me out for a bit, but yeah, I love running in the mountains and I love peaks and I love climbing. I basically and I love backcountry skiing. That's basically all I do in the wintertime. So
I know, like Alexis, that is such a beautiful story and just I think just relatable for so many people who are going through it. I think running the outdoors, the wilderness is like something we all can relate to and something that we all find like stress relief in. And I'm so happy that you did find that when you did, because I think anytime I think about you and think about Brennan and your family, you guys embrace the outdoors fully, whatever that means, like whatever that means for a certain weekend, you guys are just like in it. And I love to see that because I feel like it's just such a shared joy that you not only have yourself, but something that you've been able to share with Brennan and then also share with your three beautiful kiddos.
It's not always stress free. I do want to say that. Like, I feel like I should say, like, I love the outdoors. Life is still hard. Life is always hard.
Yeah.
There's not like if I could say one thing, I think that like I think I used to think I was going to arrive at this time in my life where it would be easier, or like you're more
Mm-hmm.
settled, you're more in your adult stage. But what you realize is that like life just actually gets more difficult by degrees, and usually you get better. But sometimes you'll look at your child who's having a meltdown, and you'll be like, I get it. I want to do that. So,
Yeah. I remember you and I were on a run probably about a year or two ago now. And that's when your youngest started going to either daycare or pre-K for
preschool.
a
Yeah,
couple
here's
hours in the day.
preschool. Yeah.
Yeah. And you were like, I have a little bit of time now. But then now that I think about you, it's like you have a little bit of time in your day. And then this year you started working at the school. You're a Nordic ski coach for your kids. You also are helping coach their soccer team. So yeah, talk a little bit about
Soccer
the
moms.
the multi-sport endeavors that you're involved in. Like you mentioned backcountry skiing and climbing, but then also that your kids are in. Yeah, what does that look like for you?
Yeah. So everything we do, our kids do. And that's been really intentional on our half. Like when I say we love to climb and run, I mean, Brennan and I have climbed not nearly as much as we used to. And I feel like what has happened is like the last 10 years, climbing and hiking with kids, you kind of have to make a choice as a parent at some point. And someday, Leah, you'll probably have kids of your own and you'll have to make these choices too. But um, there are times where you can't do both. Very few people are able to like get in their workout, everything ideally, and work a job, right? And then also
Hmm.
have time to go do said activity. A lot of the time, those things have to overlap.
Yeah.
So I mean, I would meet friends and people who were like, "We're going to go do this," and they're like, "Oh, we're not going to do that with our kids because rightfully so, it's hard." Like it's not like
Hmm.
my kids just love to hike, right? And it didn't
We're going to
start that
talk
way.
about that in a little bit.
Yeah. But you have to create this culture
Mhm.
from a very young age, and you have to kind of like keep consistent about it, which means you have to give up a lot. Like I feel like we gave up a lot of our personal climbing goals for the last 10 years. And sometimes I'm on edge and people are like, "Oh, well, my kids just don't really like climbing," or and I'm like, "Well, I don't know that my kids would like climbing either if I didn't expose them to it again and again, right?" Like,
Uh-huh.
but with any kind of family culture, whether it's like in our family, we have a little family cheer we do every morning, and it's
That's so
it's
cool.
it gets a little mixed up because there's a lot of things, but it says Krellins are kind, faithful, help others, do hard things, adventurous, and have fun. And it's been a work of love to really teach a kid how to do hard things. I think that's like sometimes it feels crazy, and sometimes you have to ask yourself, like, am I doing the right thing or whatever? But
Mhm.
I think kids should have choices in what they do, but I do think sometimes it's okay if they're like, I want to try this thing out, and then they don't like it. You're like, well, we're going to do it for the whole year. Like we're gonna see it through,
Mhm.
and or we're gonna be willing to take 6 hours to do a hike that should really only take 2 hours because we had many meltdowns.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. So, but you keep exposing them to it and stuff. So, but that's and we're so imperfect. Like my
Mhm.
family, my little family, and then my old bigger family. We are like I would say more confrontational family. So my kids fight all the time, but they also vehemently have each other's backs.
Mhm.
So every family's different, right?
All right, everybody. We are loving this chat with Leah and Alexis, and I hope you are as well. We also wanted to take a quick moment to highlight one of our sponsors. Janji's new Spring 25 season launches today, and it's inspired by the Moroccan Sahara and how we interact with the elements around us. I personally love that Janji does these unique capsule collections and that they work with local artists on the prints, which is what my trip to Mongolia with Janji last year was all about. It's a really cool way to showcase the beauty of a new place while also honoring the artists and their inspiration. Let your gear go farther. You can head to janji.com to check out the entire collection. And don't forget to use the code Trail Network for 10% off your order. Back to the show.
So I just want to preface this, especially to our listeners here. Rufa here in Utah, so that was running up for air. That was a little over a week ago now. And you are out there with all three of your kids, and your oldest, your 11-year-old daughter, Marlo, she and Phoebe Campbell conquered 4 laps on Grandeur on the day of Rufa, which amounted to over a marathon with over 10,000 feet of climbing.
Yeah.
And they were signed up for the 12-hour race. And I think that time, that number of laps took them about the full 12 hours.
They were like 11:58 or something. It was crazy.
It was so cool to witness. I think one of my biggest takeaways from that day was like, I go into Rufa every year with like, it's like my Christmas day. And I'm always curious about like who's going to be my inspiration this year. And like hands down, it was all the kids that were out there this year. Your kids being like top of that list with Phoebe and Ruby. And you shared one very cute photo from that day, which was, I think it was when Izzy was either going up or down on his lap. And I think Marlo was going up, and they exchanged a hug on the trail. And you had commented something like, this doesn't ever happen. But it was like such a sweet moment to see when they're both in this like mutual moment of struggle. These two little kids who are probably fight every other minute of the day, but just supporting each other on what was probably a really hard journey for every single one of them that was out there that day.
Totally. No, totally. And that was a special day because it was fun to have all 3 kids, the 10, 8, and 6-year-old. And they've been like, poor Izzy, I think he got dragged up he's been up Grandeur, I think the first time when he was like 4 or something. They don't even remember, like they're pulled places so often. But that day too, it was so cool because they got to see, I mean, Rufa's just so special. I feel like people don't understand unless they've been.
Yeah.
Because there's no other race where you get to interact with everybody regardless of how fast they're doing the race. Mm-hmm. And it becomes very apparent more than any other race that like everybody is doing something miraculous.
Yes.
Which I feel like sometimes you miss on a race when someone finishes, hours behind someone else. But what you don't realize is that they're at the limit of their effort, right? That 67-year-old man or 70, or like you said, the child or, Tyler Green or whoever else we had out there, that day so fast. Everybody is passing by each other. Everybody is interacting. And it kind of brings in accountability. It's really good for a kid, I think, because they get to keep seeing people, right? They get positive reinforcement that whole time. But even that, like, I haven't even like posted about it because it felt like so special.
Oh, I bet. Like,
I was I don't know how to talk about this. I'm still trying to figure out how, because I feel like sometimes if you talk about the thing, like, oh, Marlo and Phoebe did 4 laps, like people don't comprehend or they don't even believe, or it seems extreme, which it is. But what they don't see is like all the work that went into that. You know what I mean? I'm like, it's not like we pulled these kids off the couch. Like they had a goal because last year, if you remember, they did 3 laps. And so they were the ones that were like, we want to do 4. And by the way, like halfway up lap 4, they did not want to do 4 anymore. But they're kind of, Marlo and Phoebe are kind of this perfect combination because neither of them's going to turn around.
Exactly. And there was a few moments that I thought were really special on the trail. And one of them was Marlo and Phoebe were just working together and you were like 100, 200 meters back from them, like not even engaging with them, just letting them do their own thing and work through their own problems themselves and letting them like hype each other up, and just being able to like hear them engage with each other and offer positive affirmations when the going got tough was so cool to see, because it's like we always talk about like women supporting women, and it's just like these young girls who are our future just building each other up in like the most positive way possible, doing like what they probably would have otherwise deemed impossible, but being able to do it because they had each other out there.
No, absolutely. I think there's this beautiful thing that's happening as a result of some of our changing culture, which is like Marlo and Ray, my daughters, for example, like they don't have perceived limits.
Mm-hmm.
In their mind. They're more, if not, as if not more capable than any boy. And then just like the sky is the limit. And part of that is the beauty of the way things have changed, the way that the messaging has changed towards them. And then also, I really do think they have something special because they're supportive. And I think sometimes kids can be competitive
Mm-hmm.
in an unhealthy way. You know what I mean? But it works. It works for them.
Yeah.
And I think that's also changing in the female sports industry
Mm-hmm.
is like, we're realizing that we don't have to cut each other down to succeed. We build each other up. We all rise. The same exact thing is happening in running, right? In our age and younger than us.
It's
And
so cool to
it
see.
is just so, I think they'll surprise us. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like sometimes Marla will say, I want to do this thing. And I'm like, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, wait, what am I doing? Like,
You can do that.
yeah. And like, I want to also be clear, like, we got to the top of that fourth lap and I was like, oh no, what have I done? Like, was this bad? I don't know. They could have used a couple more layers,
Yeah.
But then like same thing happens. 2 days later, they're both like, we could do 5 next year. I'm like, maybe we just do 4 faster. Like,
I know Jared stopped by our house the other night and we were talking about Marlo and Phoebe's 4 laps in 12 hours. And I was like, Jared, I looked at their ultra signups the other day, and 2 years ago they did 2 laps together. Then last year they did 3 laps. And then this year it was 4 laps. And I said, for their 21st birthday, they're going to be doing 14 laps, which is the record at Rufa. So I think we have to be prepared for the record to be shattered at Rufa when those girls turn 21, because
totally.
10 years from now, it's about to be terrifying at Rufa.
Yeah. Well, and the beauty of it too is like they're just showing other kids like you can do that. Like, and their younger siblings, it builds this culture where Izzy's like, okay, next year, mom, I'm going to do 2 laps, and it trickles down. There is a little bit of disconnect at school. So I coach P at the school. And like, and people just don't believe. Like, I think people just think we lie. Because Marla comes to school and she'll be like, how was your weekend? She's like, oh, both my parents ran a 100-mile race. And they're like, no, they didn't. Like, what are you saying? And then she's like, no, they did. And then like this last weekend, she was really sore. She was like, I'm really sore today. Like, obviously, like after running Rufa, the kids were so sore. And she was like trying to tell people what she did. And they're like, you're confused. You must do 4 miles. And I was just like, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter. just let it go, like it doesn't matter. But it's really funny.
It's so cool to be a part of that too. And to like just be raising this next generation of girls and like little boys that know that they're like the sky is truly the limit. And I think you and Brennan just do such an amazing job of like letting them know that too. And I think that like also piles over into like even your own ultra running mindset. Like you see your kids out there doing hard things, that you can do hard things, and like you've done so many hard things. And so I think I'm curious, like when you're in a race, so I'll tell our audience too, if they're not familiar with your background, you are an absolute crusher. You've been podium at Speedgoat. You've been top 15 this year at UTMB, top 20 the year prior. You shaved 2.5 hours off your time at UTMB between 2023 and 2024. And this year you ran a time that would have been top 10 any other prior year.
Story of everybody's
yeah, story of everybody's life. But you're no stranger, and you held the WURL FKT a few years back. So we like nobody can do harder things than you, and it's been like a privilege to be able to get to know you and witness what you've done over the last couple years But I am curious, like when you line up for a 100-miler, when you line up for a WURL FKT attempt, you know that training for those attempts, like you sacrifice a lot. You sacrifice a lot of family time. You're really like squeezing it in. What goes through your head out there whenever, especially when you have your kids out there supporting you, and like what are like mantras you keep saying to yourself?
Yeah, I am. For one thing, it has seemed to work. I think because my kids are just like finally old enough, like that it's helpful for me actually to have them at my races. I'm a mom who like the night before my race, I actually will sleep better if my kids are in the room with me. Like I think it's just like I don't know. Especially when we're not at home, we're almost always sleeping in the same room. But I remember like 2 years ago, I did Canyons 100 milers because I was trying to qualify for UTMB. And Paul Lynn, who is my coach, I was like, I think I'm gonna have all the kids come out. And he was like, okay. He's like, I'd say no if it was anybody else, but I think that's probably the right choice. Because I feel like you can like have a mom hat and a dad hat, and then a running hat. But like if you're a mom, it's much harder to just take off the mom hat. It just doesn't actually come off. You're like,
it never comes off.
I can't.
It's
it doesn't. And maybe some people are better, but I think it's just like you separate. And twofold. Part of it is when they're out there and you do want to quit, it's hard to be like, you're like positive when you see them at the aid stations. It totally lifts your spirits. It makes you so much happier. You're excited for the next time you get to see them, for the next time you get to see them. And they don't even understand the depth of pain, So they almost like they're like, sorry, you're tired, but like, you're totally fine, right? Keep going, and you're like, I'm not fine, but I'm not going to tell you that. Like, I'm not going to tell you that. And you're showing them I think this is why I feel like my kids have this idea that like, they want, like Marlo wants to do the WURL. And I'm like, oh, I don't really want you to do the WURL. But then there's this part of me that's like, she is raised in a world where anything is possible. She and Ray and Izzy too. Like Marlo, when she was 8 years old, we took her to climb the Grand Teton because she had for a year been telling us she wanted to do it. And we told her like, okay, you have to do A, B, and C first. We have to climb these mountains. We have to be able to rappel by ourselves. We have to be able to climb these level, we trained. And she is a kid though, who is like goal driven. And I think I am too,
Yeah.
And so I think the kids see that, but I also think, as you know, Leah, like there's just no such thing as a perfect training block. There's no such thing as training perfectly, whether it's being a mom or your job, you know what I mean? Like things get in the way. And what we have to do is embrace what happens. Like people want to control every situation, but I think that's the beauty and maybe my favorite thing about 100-miler is, yes, you have to get the training in. That is so important. And more now than ever. Like you can't just like gut it out. That's not going to win a race anymore, right? But especially at something like UTMB and sometimes more mountainous, I don't know what we want to call them, gritty trails that don't just play to your fast, speedy runners, right? It really comes down to your mind, as we all know, right? And
totally.
Like, I think it was actually, I feel like it was Jared who said one time, I swear it was, he'll be like, did I say that? Jared Campbell. I feel like I was with him one time and he was like, everything's training for something. And it's like really stuck with me because where I'm like, yeah, like, when your kids are really little and you're wearing them on your back to go hiking or you're pulling them up on a ski thing or whatever, like that all builds a mental toughness as well. But I was thinking about this, like right before UTMB, for example, this year, most people vacation after UTMB, but because of our family schedule, we actually brought our kids out for UTMB and we went 2 weeks ahead of time and we went to Paris for a week and then we went and did a hut to hut hike. And so like we did all of these things in kind of my taper weeks, right? Or whatever. But like I spent the whole week before UTMB, like the 2 weeks before, but that week before the week, running around Paris. Like,
and you guys put the miles on in Paris too.
So dumb. But I was like, I could panic about this, but I just was like, I refuse to sacrifice our entire trip for this race. Now, also, I'm not a full sponsored professional runner, right? Like, if that was the case, I may have approached it differently, but I also sometimes think that's why I'm not a professional runner, is because more than climbing, more than the mountains, more than running, it's the experience that I love, right? Whether that's an experience with a friend, with a family, with my kids. That's what I think. Like, I can get as much joy sometimes accomplishing some first place race as I can creating an experience of growth and joy for my kids, even if, let's say, that joy lasted 10% of the time, 90% of the time we were struggling. But yeah, so I think I wouldn't change it for anything. And at the end of the day, like, it all works out. And it helps that my coach, Paul, for running, at least, he's like so flexible and just keeps me in the rail and knows me well enough to know like what I can get away with and what I can't.
Totally. Thank you, Osprey, for sponsoring this episode of the show. Osprey Packs are known for being durable, sustainable, and comfortable. I've been seeing a ton of Duro and Dyna trail running hydration packs on the trail, and I'm sure you have too. I also have to rave about my new favorite luggage, the Daylight Carry-On Travel Pack 44 liter. It is the biggest carry-on allowed on an airplane, and wow, have I been amazed at the amount of gear that this can carry. It's shocking. You can use it as a duffel or a backpack, which is super handy, and it has 2 stretch water bottle pockets, which I love. An open suitcase style with full zip opening. Honestly, it's the perfect travel bag for those on the go. The Daylight Carry-On Travel Pack 44 liter. Try it out at osprey.com or check on the Pack Finder link to find the perfect pack for you. Yeah, talk a little bit about your relationship with Paul, because if I had to pick any coach that is the perfect coach for you, it's got to be Paul Lind. He has just like such a warm heart, a warm soul, but is also able to get a lot out of you and know how to work with everything that you have going on. And he knows you as a human, supports you as a human. And if anybody has ever seen Paul support any of his athletes at races, not even like he supports me and I'm not even one of his athletes, anybody at a race, like, you know, you're getting this like father figure out there on the trail. And I know that's something that's really meaningful to you. So talk a little bit about how your relationship with Paul came about and how it's evolved over the years.
Totally. It was probably like, oh my gosh, might be like 6 years ago now. I should know. So I went out and ran this race called the River of No Return. And I did a 50K there because I was just kind of getting back into running after my last kid. And I honestly had no idea what the race was. I had a cousin who was like, you should go run this race. And I was like, Chalice, Idaho. Sweet. I'll go do it. And I like show up at this race, and I remember I was late, so I missed the meeting. So I walked up to this person who looked like they were maybe knowledgeable. And it was Paul, but I didn't know that at the time. I was like, hey, Mrs. Like, I missed the speech. Like, what's going on? Like, can you give me the down low? And he's like, oh, I'll register you. He's talking me through. He's like, so what's your goals? You know? And I was like, me, like, I don't usually say this, but I was like, showed up at a race in Idaho that I'd never heard of. So I was like, I mean, I'd like to win it. And he was like, really? I was like, yeah. Anyways, long story short, I run this race and I won it.
Yes.
And he kept calling me Utah the whole time. And actually, I met Emily Hoggood, who also was coached by Paul. And then I think Brittany was there and Cody. Like, I remember I met Cody that time. I didn't know who any of them were. Like, Emily was just really nice. That's what I remember. And I didn't know who Paul was. And not that he's like a known person necessarily, but it was just like, after the race, I was like, so I signed up for this race called Speedgoat. Would you like maybe throw together a training plan for me? And he was like, whoa. He's like, we're gauge 20. We have a thing. He's like, I don't just casually coach people. And I was like, oh, okay. He was like, no, I mean, he's like, I do coach. I'm not really looking for anybody else. And we take it very seriously. Like, my coaching is, everything has to be a good fit. So we chatted a little, and anyways, long story short, he like came back and was like, actually, after the race and everything, he was like, I feel like we would be a good fit. And he went on, and like that was the year I think Britt got second. Is that right? At Western States? I can't remember. But he just called me up, and he like came and met Brennan. Like Paul is really close with his athletes in a way that it's kind of like you kind of step into a family circle. And I had lost my dad 3 years earlier. So that was, I'm somebody, I don't know, Leah, if you're this way, but like, I am someone from a young child who's always responded really well to good coaches. And I don't mean like not bad coaches, but coaches who like build you up, are supportive, all that stuff.
Yes.
And I can go so far with that. And the truth is, like, Paul is more than a coach. He's also just been like a good life coach. He'll like often say to me, like, okay, now I'm putting my dad hat on. I'm putting my coach hat on. I think it was good timing, and he's understood, me as a whole athlete. And I love my teammates there. Like, I've met so many wonderful people, and it's a pretty small team. I think there's like 7 or 8 of us.
Yeah, there's not a lot of you guys, but it seems so close knit. And it's like over the years, I feel like there's just been this great bond that has been able to form across everybody. And it's really cool to see.
Yeah. So that's been nice, because it's like a support system for running. And yeah, I don't know. And like I said, some people don't need that, but it's been beneficial to me to have kind of not only a coach, but like a little bit of a life sounding board.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And like a built-in community of support when you're at these races like UTMB, which can just feel like complete chaos. And then you hear and see somebody everywhere out there, and you're like, how did Paul just get here?
Oh, I remember I showed up. My first 100-miler was I Am Tough. And Brennan and I were in the middle of building our house, and we weren't seeing each other. And we both had signed up for hundreds that weekend. So I was doing I Am Tough, and he was doing Wasatch.
Oh my goodness.
And so we had like got childcare for the kids for that weekend. And I drove to Idaho, and I literally it was the night before I got in at like 7:00, and Emily and Paul were there. And I was just like, I don't know anything about the course. And they just were like, Emily was just like, I got you. And she was like, okay, she was like putting food in the bag, like, what do you want in the bag? And then it was one of those things where like, I wouldn't have been able to run that race if it hadn't been for them. Easily. No. Like they took care of me. My cousin came and paced me, but they knew everything about the next step and what was happening. And sometimes you need that, right? Sometimes you don't. But I was thinking, I don't know, for those of you who know who Emily Hoggett is, she is just like pure gold of a human being
in every way possible.
And I haven't talked to her in a couple of weeks, but I'm not gonna get emotional. She's been such a sweet, supportive friend. And I was thinking about it, and I was like, when I went to UTMB this year, it was the first time I ever ran a 100-miler without her.
Really?
She has crewed me at every one of my 100-milers, including 2 years ago, my first time at UTMB. She was running CCC.
Yes.
And she ran CCC, finished second place. Got in a car, came back, met me as I was coming out of Corte Mayer, and I was in such a rough spot. Like that was a rough first 50 miles for me. She was there waiting after she went, and she crewed me until my last aid station. And so those were all wonderful experiences, but they're the kind of people that, show up when you need them. And you are also just a wonderful person, though. Yeah. You and Emily remind me of each other in some ways a lot. I was talking to Brendan about that the other day. Just really women who have helped change the culture of the sport away from competitiveness to loving, embracing, and building each other up. And I feel like that's actually, I don't feel like we talk about this very much, but I feel like that's at the heart of why we've gotten faster.
I think so too. And like, it makes me reflect back on you and I got to share the first 6 or 7 miles of UTMB together
that year.
last year. And
before my wheels came off.
Oh, totally. I mean, same. And we were in this experience together, just both being like, we were just riding the energy of everything that was happening around us, riding the energy of having each other, knowing that we were going way too fast for 100 miles, but we were doing it anyway. And it's moments like that in a race where you're completely over your head, but it feels so right in that moment. And one of the comments I had after UTMB was like, I know I went out too fast, but if I could do it again, would I do it the exact same way? And I think the answer was yes. Because it was just special and it was chaos and it was like adrenaline, and it's you don't get those moments back. So there's these moments where it's like you might be feeling like you're being a little bit too risky in a race, but then you kind of think about the experience that surrounds it and you're like, this kind of does make sense.
Oh yeah. Well, what's so funny too is like I was looking at my times and I'm like, I didn't run it any slower this year, but I was just like way better prepared for that emotional dump at the beginning of the race. I feel like it's something you try to explain to people. Yeah. Like, the hype lasts for like 30 miles.
Yes.
And then you got to crash. So you got to fight the hype for those first 30 miles. Oh, that's a magical race. I'm excited to see you do that one again.
I know. I need to. Someday. It's one of these years. But yeah, Alexis, so now you've gone, you ran 29 something hours UTMB. In 1 year, you went down to like 27 hours and change at UTMB. Do you see yourself returning to UTMB, or do you have other goals on the docket?
Like, if somebody were like, I will pay your way to UTMB this year, I would absolutely do it. I actually, it was kind of sad. I think there was the whole like UTMB thing that happened with, well, we all know, we don't need to rehash it. But that race is so fun. It was surprisingly fun. It is special. And especially considering, like, I think you and I both grew up in ultras in kind of the antithesis of that race, which is like these backyard races because I also love, where you have like your just lay people out there running 100 miles, and it's astounding. And it's equally like, I actually went from UTMB last year and came back and I worked an aid station at Wasatch. And I think I was like equally inspired by working at the
100%,
right?
Yeah.
So I love both things, but my first time on that UTMB start line was something like I will just never be able to replicate. You see all these people who are so grateful and work so hard to be there. They're so psyched out of their mind, and then you get to go through the mountains, and it's a beautiful course. It's
a beautiful course, and it's a great loop.
It's a great loop. I mean, the next time I go to Chamonix, I kind of want to climb Mont Blanc instead of going around it. So that would be my next objective. But it's like anything. I've never done too many races multiple times, but it's like you start to see like, oh, I can improve here. Now I can improve here. And so that's kind of a slippery slope. I know somebody asked me, like, would you go back? And I was like, I mean, it's just expensive. It's really expensive when you don't have a sponsor. And it's and like my kids would want to come again. So anyways. Maybe. I would like to get into hard rock, that would be more ideal, but that's so hard to get into. So we'll see. I'm so excited you got in.
I know. I'm still in shock about it.
I was
it hasn't registered
entirely. A little jealous. I was a little jealous.
I know. I almost got to the point where like I stopped expecting to get into hard rock over the last couple of years, that like when my name got drawn, I was like, oh, okay, was not even expecting that. So now I need to figure out how to feel about this.
It'll happen when it needs to. I'm so excited for you.
Awesome. Well, Alexis, this has been so nice. Is there anything else you'd like to leave our listeners with?
No, I guess like just circling back to the parenting thing, because this has been on my mind a lot, where I feel like Brennan and I are starting to kind of see some fun gains with our kids. Like our kids are like, great, everybody participated in RUFA this year. That's awesome. But where the activities that Brennan and I want to do, we can just do with our kids at a slower pace, right? Or whatever it happens to be. And that's been awesome. And I think like what I want to say is it takes time, and don't give up. Like as a parent of someone who's trying to get your kids, like I had a friend say to me the other day, she's like, I guess you're proving the point that like you can, what did she say? Like you can, like you can influence your children's passions. And I'm like, well, yeah, like you have to be careful, right? I'm not saying like strong arm them into everything you want to do. That's never going to work. It will blow up in your face really bad. But exposure, I feel like is the key. And so just like, don't give up when it gets hard, or like maybe you have some hard months or years and you circle back to things, you know, and like kids change, try to make things fun. Also though, just be like willing to do the hard thing. I think we do this like year trip every year with the kids, and we've done it since they were very little. And it's a 3-mile like hike into this yurt uphill, and we put them on skis and stuff.
The
but like
skis on.
Yeah, they have to ski up too, which is good. But I think about that all the time, and I'm like, we don't sleep when we're up there. We don't sleep because we have to put logs on the fire. You have to take turns doing. So I just like, there's a lot of sleepless nights. There's things, and I'll have friends be like, well, I don't want to do that because I'm like, I'm not going to sleep. And I'm like, well, but then eventually you will sleep, because eventually they'll be the ones getting up and putting the logs on the fire, you know? So it's like like, that's something I would like to say. It's even with running, right? I think we all believe this. And actually I think it was like David Roach who said this the other day, just like sometimes our goals do not come for years. That we can't, it's always the long run. Like it's never the short term. And we live in a world where we just want everything right now, all the time. We want to see ourselves get better. We want to see our kids get better. We want to see the world get better, but change takes time and dedication. So like keep fighting the good fight out there, parents. Cause like the soccer's worth it. I have to say, like, I never thought I'd have so much fun watching subpar soccer. It was such a
laugh. I saw your pictures from this past weekend, and I'm like, gosh, no, I want to be a soccer coach.
You eventually will have children who might want to do sports. I mean, I love soccer, so it's easy for me, but like, we're not like in the highest league. It's not like my kids are like ultra competitive. They're going to be college. It's like, wow, you're enjoying this, and I love that you love this. And it just, I don't know, it doesn't take up your whole life. We still climbed in between the soccer games, so all worked out.
Well, I will say, Alexis, anytime I want to show people like what type of parents I want to be, me and Mike want to be someday, I show them a picture of your family and all the things that they do. And even this year at UTMB, my parents were out there helping crew my.
They were so cute. I met them.
And I was chatting with Brennan. And your 3 kids were out there, and I showed my parents the pictures of you guys in the Via Ferrata like the week prior. And I'm like, look what these kids did. Look what these kids did. And they were just like astounded by it. I'm like, yeah, this is cool. Like kids can do really hard things, and you just don't need to put them in a box. And
totally. That's what I would say is like, but Leah, and I'm just grateful for you too, because like Marlo still remembers going to your Women of the Wasatch thing, and she'll like mention stuff every now and again from your talk. And so it's just, we're all in this community together, and I'm so grateful for you as well. I want to still grow up to be like you, and I'm already grown up. Gosh.
Have to live vicariously through your kids and my future kids.
There we go.
Well, again, Alexis, this has been beautiful. Thanks so much for sharing your journey with us. Yes. I know so many of our listeners will be so excited to finally get to know Alexis Crellin and get to share the last hour with you.
I don't know about that, but it was really fun to talk to you. So,
all right. Thanks, Lex. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Trail Network podcast. And thank you so much to Alexis for joining us and sharing so many of her insights with us. I feel so inspired just to go conquer anything in the mountains after chatting with her. For those of you who are listening, please like, subscribe, share your comments, send some messages to us on Instagram. We love your feedback. And as always, we appreciate you being here. Until next time.